Out there and ride your bike. We're unstoppable.
I was biking in the hills of Italy this morning in the luxury of my garage while I was on Rovi on my computer, and
Classic.
I was quite happy.
Classic. The poetry of Patrick Morgan on World Bicycle Day. 20 seconds, Patrick, to those who haven't picked up a bike, who haven't ridden, what would you say?
Well, again, I'd say it's magic at any age. I think one of the things we find is when people get back on a bike, they know how to do it, they grin, they feel the freedom and the convenience. So you can't erase biking, we're here to stay.
Here to stay, Freedom Day. Cycling in Wellington is fantastic. Don't listen to the haters, is a text. Kia ora, Patrick, Andrew Rahman, Scott Campbell. Have a great long weekend.
Thank
Love
you.
your company this afternoon. And a big thank you to my producer, Tim Miller. To the team, have a great weekend. See you 3:45 Tuesday. Checkpoint next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei, COVID, flu, florona, call it what you will. Why are our hospitals and emergency services already at crisis point, and what does it mean for our GPs? Health Minister Andrew Little is live. A frightened family hides in a stairwell after more gang tension in Auckland overnight. Is it time to declare a crime emergency? Some dairy owners reckon so. US President Joe Biden's impassioned plea for Congress to ban assault weapons. 4-year-old Prince Louis steals the show at his Gangan's Jubilee celebrations, and we'll reveal the country's sunniest region, and we'll give you a clue. It's not Northland or the Bay of Plenty. What could it be? RNZ News at 5. Ahi Mārie, ko Ivy Ashton tēnei. Workers near the Papakura courthouse, where a shooting took place this afternoon, say police have given them no information about what happened. The incident shortly before 1 o'clock prompted a large police response. One person is in hospital with critical injuries. At least 8 armed officers guarded the scene this afternoon and spoke to people inside the bar next door to the courthouse. Devika Sharma manages the Unichem pharmacy over the road. She says she didn't hear the shooting but looked outside and saw a man lying on the ground outside the courthouse being treated by paramedics. When the police arrived a short time later, she says they wouldn't tell her if the shooter was still at large. A woman who works across the roundabout from the courthouse says she saw a man being put into an ambulance on a stretcher, but also didn't hear any shooting.
It's quite strange. Just before the ambulances came, I was actually outside with my husband talking, and we didn't hear anything. All we heard was a lot of sirens, and then the police helicopter was hovering around up above, and it was like, oh, something's happening around here.
She says the shooting is a worry. St John is warning people should expect delays for non-urgent problems because of the immense pressure it's under. The ambulance service is receiving 14% more 111 calls than its anticipated upper limit for this time of year. It's also dealing with staff shortages. In one case that wasn't urgent, St John's Deputy Chief Executive Dan Ows says a person waited up to 14 hours.
And in that example of the 14-hour incident, it was a request for transport from a GP, but 14 hours is much longer than we would like to keep people waiting in the community, quite clearly.
Dan Ows says most patients who need urgent help are seen within 15 minutes, when the aim is to reach them in about 8 minutes. A director at the new Violent Extremism Research Centre says it faces a huge task. The launch of He Whenua Taurikura at Parliament today acts on a recommendation from the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Christchurch terror attacks. The centre will study ways to prevent and counter violent extremism and terrorism. Professor Joanna Kidman says the research will explore some dark places in the nation's psyche.
We are going to produce an evidence base that will help us to understand and make sense of those hairline fractures in our communities that at times have splintered into violence and hatred.
11 scholarships have been provided to students who will conduct research for the centre, which will initially be based at Victoria University. The Prime Minister has paid tribute to the Queen for the stability her 70-year-old reign has given her subjects around the world. Speaking at the Platinum Jubilee celebration service at the Wellington Cathedral of St Paul today, Jacinda Ardern quoted from her predecessor, Sydney Holland, who was present at the Accession Council at St James's Palace in 1953.
But even he may not have dared assume that we would experience a sense of comfort and stability through challenge, tragedy and change that has been provided by Her Majesty Elizabeth R.
Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand is celebrating the Queen's Platinum Jubilee with a sense of awe, reverence and gratitude. And police will be out in force over the long weekend, checking motorists' speed and targeting impaired and distracted drivers. Minister of Transport, Michael Wood, says the government is investing in road safety improvements across the country, installing median barriers, roundabouts at dangerous intersections and re-engineering roads. But he says drivers need to play their part by making smart decisions while on the road. On average, one person is killed every day on New Zealand roads and another 7 are seriously injured. Mr Wood says the country needs to stop accepting deaths on the roads as inevitable. To sport, and the Crusaders coach Scott Robertson says the advantage of playing the same team twice in a row is they know what to do to beat them. The second-placed Crusaders host the 7th-placed Queensland Reds in the first Super Rugby quarter-final in Christchurch tonight, having just beaten the Reds 28-15 last weekend.
You know what can work and what can work well, and we want to make sure that you've got to absolutely get right. And we know Queensland and we know how Brad coaches, so there's a familiarity, but you can also get caught in that trap if you assume something.
After a hectic opening day where 17 wickets fell, the Black Caps are unsure what day 2 of the first cricket test against England at Lord's holds. England are 116 for 7 in reply to New Zealand's first innings of 132. Pace bowler Kyle Jamieson is unsure what a pass score for the Black Caps should have been, but says they can't afford a second innings repeat. Grand final hosting rights will be decided by the result of tonight's ANZ Premiership netball game between the Pulse and Northern Mystics in Auckland. The two teams are equal on points and whoever wins tonight will secure a home grand final, while the loser will have to play the Northern Stars in the elimination final on Wednesday. Lydia Ko's made a slow start to the US Open, carding an opening round of 1 over par 72 to be 8 shots off the lead. And the Boston Celtics have staged a fourth quarter comeback to beat the Golden State Warriors 120-108 in Game 1 of the NBA Finals in San Francisco. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Francis Fukuyama once believed liberal capitalist democracy was the winner. Turns out history did not end there. Joan Wasser, a.k.a. Jonah's policewoman, she's about to tour here. Legendary publisher Roger Steele and playwright Hone Koka has a new work. It's theatre, it's dance, it's farce. Call Kim Hillaho. Join me Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
You're with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday, and it's a wet start to the long weekend. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Showers, possibly thundery with hail easing and becoming isolated this evening. Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumarunui, possibly thundery showers with hail easing this evening and clearing tomorrow morning, becoming fine. From Waitomotu, Kapiti Coast, showers in your area are clearing tomorrow morning to become fine. Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington. Isolated showers, more widespread for a time in Hawke's Bay and Gisborne this afternoon and evening with possible thunderstorms. Showers clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. I feel like I'm repeating myself. Nelson and Bulla, mostly fine. Scattered showers for a time this afternoon and evening, possibly heavy. Westland and Fiordland, scattered showers in southern Fiordland and also north of Hokitika, becoming isolated this evening. Mainly fine elsewhere. For Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly fine this afternoon. Frosts tomorrow morning. Otago and Southland, showers clearing clearing before dawn tomorrow to become fine, and for the Chatham Islands, a few showers. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll update you with the latest headlines and traffic at 5:20.
Ngā mihi, Evie. That was the long weekend weather forecast there. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Multiple waves of winter illness are washing over a health system already under strain, and now the fight is on to keep clinicians' heads above water. Dunedin Hospital is closed to visitors. Hawke's Bay Hospital is fighting the flu. And in counties Manukau, the surge of winter illness has come so much earlier than expected. The DHB is describing the hospital as ground zero. Health Minister Andrew Little joins us in a moment, but first Timothy Brown reports on why clinicians across the motu are under the pump.
Last night, Dunedin Hospital closed all its wards to visitors after patients and staff on several wards were exposed to COVID-19. 26 patients are in Dunedin Hospital with the virus today, a rise of more than 60% from early last week. Southern DHB's chair, Pete Hodson, says considering the environment, closing to visitors makes sense.
The proactivity of the staff is to be admired. I mean, they're saying we're closing to visitors because we're going to get on top of this, and so you do need to manage these diseases very assertively, and our staff are, and I think that's great. I'm fully supportive of it.
Some are still allowed on compassionate grounds, but Mr Hodson says he understands it will be frustrating for many. Southern DHB took the same step at Southland Hospital last month, before reopening to visitors a week later. Health Minister Andrew Little, who's in Dunedin to mark the beginning of construction of the city's new hospital, also says the measure makes sense, with the health system battling COVID, influenza and other respiratory ills like RSV.
All hospitals are having to manage that and manage the risk of infection to other patients and to visitors. So it doesn't surprise me. We're seeing other hospitals taking similar measures. They're all very short term. It is just while we have this period where there are various infections around and a degree of contagion, and we just have to manage that as best we can.
Dunedin Hospital's COVID-19 ward has been running at capacity, and other wards may be temporarily used for COVID patients. But it's not the only facility facing the strain, with hospitals around the motu also extremely busy. Hawke's Bay Hospital has 33 patients with the flu today, more than 3 times the number on Monday. Another 14 patients have COVID. In counties Manukau DHB, the surge of winter illness has come much earlier than expected. Chair Mark Goshi says Middlemore has been at near capacity throughout the pandemic. He describes the hospital as ground zero.
We've got lots of winter illnesses impacting us right now. The COVID has stubbornly stayed at a level that impacts every part of the hospital. There isn't a single part of the hospital, it's the entire organisation. And the community and primary sector that serves counties Manukau are feeling a lot of pressure as well.
It all adds up to more strain for clinicians on the front line, who are also fighting illness themselves. Over recent weeks, an average 14% of the more than 3,500 clinical staff at Wellington Regional Hospital and 4% of the more than 1,600 staff at Hutt Hospital have been absent. Australasian College of Emergency Medicine spokesperson Dr John Bonning says hospitals are full and emergency departments overflowing.
We've kind of got a perfect storm of the beginning of winter, winter ailments, respiratory viruses that we have not been exposed to for a couple of years, the tail end of COVID, although it's a pretty wicked tail in terms of number of cases, and of course adding to that staff burnout.
College of General Practitioners Medical Director Dr Brian Betty says GPs are also inundated as people turn to community providers with hospitals at capacity.
We're getting a lot of reports back from general practices around the country that they are under increased pressure as well, both from still managing COVID, but also influenza seems to be having a real impact in certain parts of the country in these viral illnesses. So it's a very, very stressful situation at this point.
St John's Deputy Chief Executive Dan Ows says winter has also arrived early for paramedics.
It's come 6 weeks earlier than we had anticipated with our winter modelling, and that is placing immense pressure on our service and on our people. Right now, we're receiving 14% more triple ones than we would anticipate for our upper limit at this time of year.
There's no easy answers, with clinicians agreeing more staff and more resources will be the key in the long term. But over the coming winter, they're pleading for mask wearing among the public and patients from those seeking care.
And joining us now is the Health Minister, Andrew Little. Tēnā koe e te minita. It sounds like a crisis, is it?
It's certainly a system under huge pressure, but we knew that this winter was going to be a particularly difficult one because we've had 2 years with the borders closed and we just haven't had the flu and the flu strains that we wouldn't ordinarily see. We expected that there would be elevated levels of infection this year. I think, as some of the clinicians have said, it's probably hit us a little earlier than we expected. We also know that COVID, although it's reduced in terms of infection levels as we expected, probably hasn't reduced as much as we expected. So there's still between 350 and 500 people at any day in hospital with COVID-related or COVID infections. And so, look, this is the pressure that we're under. The measures that hospitals are taking in terms of infection prevention and control, such as restricting visitors, is just what you would expect in this sort of environment, inconvenient as it is to people. But we've got to look after the patients who are there, and we definitely have to look after the health staff who are there, who do an incredible job under these difficult circumstances. These are measures to try to protect everybody.
Given EDs are slammed and GPs are saying they're slammed too, why not offer the flu jab to anyone who wants it for free?
Well, it's definitely offered to every health worker who wants it for free, and we've added about 250,000 extra free flu jabs targeted at particular population groups. And we know that a lot of employers offer it for free for their people anyway. So we are seeing...
Why not everyone though, Minister? Because, people are saying perfect storm is what some health professionals are saying with COVID, the flu and other respiratory illnesses we haven't been exposed for some time. This is something that we could do, right? Could offer it to free to everyone. What is preventing you doing that?
Well, we never have before, but we know this year we needed to step up in terms of what we've done. We've got, it's still, I think, less than 1 million jabs have been administered so far, and we really still do need to get more people getting their flu jab, both the ones publicly provided, but also funded through employers. We do need more of that. But look, for some people, they don't need it. They don't need the flu jab, so it doesn't make sense necessarily to offer it to everybody, but the numbers we are offering it free to covers a huge chunk of the population.
Do you have enough to offer it to everyone, or is that the reason you're not?
Well, we don't. We've never procured enough of the entire population. I think we've got over 2 million doses available, publicly available, and whatever else it is that private employers secure. So we have enough to cover a large chunk of the population, but not everybody needs it.
What about the antiviral Tamiflu? You got enough of that?
I haven't been advised on what we've got in terms of antivirals for it. The flu jab is the best sort of preventive action that can be taken. And then when people do fall unwell, as we're seeing, is do stay home, do stay away and don't infect others.
St John has said it's reached its forecast peak 6 weeks ahead of what it was expecting. I mean, what information have you been given in terms of forecasts about what to expect and how's it changing?
Well, we expected to reach the peak later in June, and we were expecting, COVID numbers to rise later in the winter as well, close to July. The COVID numbers have been sort of plateauing. They haven't fallen to the level that was forecast earlier this year. So I think it is right, as the other commentators you've had on your show have said, is that things have come earlier than expected. There's confluence of all these sorts of things. So that will mean a system under pressure for a period of time. They've also said, look, of course more resources and of course more people, and that's the priority for us. That's why we put additional resources in this year's budget, and the recruitment campaigns continue at pace to get more people. But those are longer term, as I think they've also...
Minister, people are grateful for that, but as you point out yourself, they are longer term. So Health New Zealand takes over the helm next month, right? And it's coming with a workforce task force, and you've tagged money in the budget for that. How quickly will that be up and running? What's the scope and time frame for that work about getting more health professionals on deck?
Well, that work is happening now. Recruitment campaigns are under now, the transfer from the DHBs to Health NZ will be reasonably seamless. And Health NZ is significantly established already. There'll be the transfer of employees and what have you. Operationally, not a lot will change on the front line on the 1st of July. So the work of getting more nurses and other clinicians on board and into the workforce, that is ongoing, and that is going at as fast as we could possibly hope for.
What can you do to ease the pressure right now? Are plans being made to redeploy staff to other areas in the country?
I'm not aware of plans at this point. I mean, the benefit of Health NZ being the single employer of the entire public health workforce is that if that is necessary, it becomes a lot easier to do that. But right now, the sort of measures that hospitals are taking, which is restricting visitors so that we reduce the potential for greater infection and greater contagion, those are the sorts of measures that are needed to slow down and keep the pressure off, or further pressure off the hospitals.
Some health professionals have suggested to Checkpoint that they would like to see you make available public daily ED wait times and bed occupancy rates from hospitals, along with the COVID stats, so that we have a realistic, transparent look at how we're doing. Could you do that?
Well, I understood they were being made available, and I get the data, and we know that the hospital occupancy across the system as a whole has been sitting at over 90% now for the last sort of couple of weeks, and up towards the 92%. That does mean it's a system under real pressure. But those numbers, a lot of COVID numbers are released each day anyway, so there's no reason why that information can't be made available. The ED waiting times tend to be collated on a monthly basis, so I get them on a monthly basis. But that data is all kept, and that can be made available.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Health Minister Andrew Little. The South Auckland suburb of Papakura was rocked by a shooting this afternoon right outside the district court next to the police station. The incident unfolded just before 1 o'clock, and one person was taken to Middleborough Hospital in a critical condition. Devika Sharma manages the Unichem pharmacy across the road. Now, she told our reporter Katie Todd she was right in the thick of a busy day at work when she realised something had happened.
All of a sudden the shop was just really quiet, but when we looked out we saw a guy in a blue t-shirt. He was just lying straight in front of the courthouse door. He was just lying, and there was a couple of security guards sort of just hovering over him, and there was a thermal blanket over him, and we thought, because we hadn't heard anything, we just thought, someone's just fainted or something. And for a moment I thought, do they need help? Should I go and help? Do they need to do CPR or whatever?
Dozens of armed police officers cordoned off a section of Great South Road and also put police tape across Stampede Bar. Now, that's next door to the courthouse. Witnesses say a number of ambulances were also on site, and they saw the man lifted onto a stretcher and taken away. Devika Sharma learnt a shooting had taken place. Fearing for the safety of her staff, she says she spoke to a police officer.
He didn't say anything to us. He just said, look, there was a situation, but it's now under control. Because I said to him, are my staff safe? Because I will close my doors for their safety if there's someone still with a gun around. But he said, you are safer than you'd normally be in Papakura right now, I think probably because of the high police presence.
Right. And was that enough reassurance for you, or were you a bit worried?
No, it wasn't.
Few details have emerged by the time the police cordons were lifted shortly after 3 o'clock. Devika Sharma says her staff and customers have been left feeling a bit rattled.
It was a little bit scary, I have to admit. It's just a little bit too close to home.
Other nearby workers told RNZ they didn't hear the gunshots, but they also want answers about what's happened. The police have just issued a statement saying their inquiries are in the very early stages, and at this stage it's not been established if the incident is associated with ongoing gang tensions across Tamaki Makaurau. They say they're working hard to understand what has occurred and to locate all involved. It is 21 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora anō, you're listening to Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Let us know your thoughts on what some health professionals are calling the perfect storm. We'd love to hear from you. If you're working in ED or on the wards, we hear it's pretty slammed in there. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can Facebook us at Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time we got to the headlines now. Ane, Evie, mina pita kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. A top doctor says the stress and strain hospitals and emergency departments are facing was entirely predictable. John Bonning, spokesperson for the Australasian College of Emergency Medicine, says winter illnesses, COVID-19 and a workforce crisis have created the perfect storm. He says the health workforce is the number one concern. The Minister of Health, Andrew Little, has told Checkpoint the health system is under pressure from illness at the moment, but says it was always expected it would happen at this time of the year. One person is in a critical condition after a shooting near the Papakura District Court in Auckland. The police were called to Great South Road just before 1 p.m. A woman who works close by says there are a lot of police in the area and some are armed. New Zealand now has its own research centre dedicated to preventing and countering violent extremism. He Whenua Tauri Kura will fund research into extremism to inform public discussion and guide policy work. 14 more people have died with COVID-19 and 6,232 new community cases have been reported today. 4 cases of the Omicron subvariant BA5 and 1 case of BA4 have been detected in the community with no clear link to the border for the first time. And in the UK, the Queen will miss tomorrow's National Church service in her honour after experiencing discomfort while watching events on the first day of her Jubilee celebrations. Those are the headlines. Now looking at traffic. In Auckland, a crash is blocking the right lane heading south on State Highway 20 by the Hillsborough Road on-ramp. There are 30-minute delays between the Waterview Tunnel and the crash site. And for holidaymakers travelling through the central North Island, there's flooding on State Highway 1 just north of Turangi. A 30k speed limits in place. Pass with care. We'll update you with the latest news headlines and traffic at around 5:40.
Ngā mihi, Evie. This afternoon's shooting outside Papakura District Court followed a major police operation in Pakuranga last night. The 2 incidents are the latest in over a dozen gang-related shootings, arsons and police raids in Auckland over the past month. Last night's AOS call-out in Pakuranga has left some shaken, with residents having to hunker down in their homes for hours. Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe report.
Dinnertime drama on Swan Crescent. The police eagle whirring overhead as squad cars descend on a suburban street just before 6 p.m. Thursday night. Armed officers shouting, "You're surrounded," as they move in on an Airbnb harbouring affiliates of the Tribesman gang. Locals say it's not what they expected to see on their front doorstep. Some here telling me they're well aware of heightened gang activity in Auckland, making the wise choice last night to lock their doors and hide away.
We were having dinner, and then what really made us feel like, oh, it's come really close now, is the dogs barking and the doors slamming. So we literally just took refuge in the stairwell and just listened to everything happen around us.
This resident who lives nearby the property in question telling us he and his young family locked their doors and took cover.
Because in the news reports there were a lot of gun-related incidents of late, we just thought, let's just play it safe and let's not have any of that sort of situation. Like, if anything came about, at least we're in the safest part of the house we could think of.
Safe to say, the saga's come as a shock. This is a family-friendly street. There's a school, scooters and swings litter front yards.
This is New Zealand, this isn't America, and we were like, well, this is interesting. So no, not at all. Didn't expect it. Wasn't really counted on, and next minute, there it all is.
The owner didn't want to appear on camera, telling us she's not exactly sure what occurred last night, but police have told us the 12 individuals arrested do have gang affiliations, and they believed there were guns on site. Eloise Sangyam lives just off Swan Crescent. She says armed police screamed at residents to get inside and stay inside as they descended on the property.
All of a sudden, we just had all the police just lined up, and then, basically saw SWAT teams and things, and it was just like anybody that came outside were told to get inside, and basically, we just stayed inside, but we were, it was pretty intense, very, very intense, quite scary actually,
Satyamani Pillai lives directly across the road from the scene of the incident.
A friend of mine who stays with me, he rang me and said, don't open the gate, and the cops are around and they block the road at gunpoint, so you're not supposed to enter.
Back around the corner, Eloise Sangyam says partners stuck outside the cordon were stranded for hours, fearing for family living near the commotion.
It was quite scary because they had partners were stuck and couldn't get in. So yeah, and a lot of people were just trying to stay as far into their houses as we could, just to keep ourselves safe, really.
Hours later, armed police started to withdraw, 12 people taken into custody, but not before 2 vehicles attempted to flee.
I saw them walking up in handcuffs, and just being arrested in the middle. But yeah, we had police all, on our driveway and everything and all over.
In a statement, police say they surrounded the property after learning of suspicious activity involving firearms. No shots were fired, with police saying loud bangs echoing from the scene were distraction devices used by AOS squad members. It's the latest in a string of gang-related incidents across Auckland, including over a dozen shootings and suspected arson attacks over the last month. Superintendent Jill Rogers says police have seized 9 firearms, 341 rounds of ammunition, made 19 arrests and laid nearly 24 charges over the past 2 weeks. Those arrested are affiliated with 2 gangs, the Killer Bees and Tribesmen.
And if you were listening to that story from the 2 Nicks, we'll put up the video version on our webpage. To the US now, and President Joe Biden has delivered an impassioned plea to restore limits on the sale of assault-style weapons in high-capacity magazines after a series of mass shootings in the country. In a prime-time address from the White House, the US President urged Republicans to support gun law reforms. He posed a simple question to the nation: how many more innocent lives must be lost? The ABC's Oliver Gordon reports.
It's a simple question the United States can't agree on an answer to.
For God's sake, how much more carnage are we willing to accept? How many more innocent American lives must be taken before we say enough, enough?
In the US, all major broadcast networks broke away from regular programming to carry President Joe Biden's address. He spoke to a nation coming to terms with yet another string of mass shootings, the most high-profile of which saw 19 students and 2 teachers killed at a Texas elementary school, where the president visited this week.
Standing there in that small town, like so many other communities across America, I couldn't help but think there are too many other schools, too many other everyday places that have become killing fields, battlefields here in America.
In his speech, which pundits have already labelled as his strongest yet as president, he outlined a list of the reforms he's pursuing.
We need to ban assault weapons in high-capacity magazines. And if we can't ban assault weapons, then we should raise the age to purchase them from 18 to 21. Strengthen background checks. Enact safe storage law and red flag laws. Repeal the immunity that protects gun manufacturers from liability.
But a list of reforms is meaningless without bipartisan support, something Joe Biden is all too aware of.
But my God, the fact that the majority of the Senate Republicans don't want any of these proposals even to be debated or come up for a vote, I find unconscionable. We can't fail the American people again.
Bruce Wolpe is a senior fellow at Australia's United States Study Centre.
The country is fearful and it's tense, and these massacres contribute to that. So Biden absolutely framed it correctly as to what can be done, what has to be done. I actually think his patience is running out. The bipartisanship that has been a hallmark of 30 years in the Senate, 8 years as vice president, now in his second year as president, he always cherished bipartisanship, that he could go across the aisle. He is seeing the door slammed in his face by these Republicans who refuse to budge on guns.
The US politics expert will be watching the reaction to Biden's speech closely.
We will know in the next week or so whether in fact this will work. If it fails, God help us all. If it succeeds, it'll be a small but important step to reestablishing some rationality over America's gun culture.
It is about 5:30. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and you won't want to miss business. Ko taku hoa inai ko Nona Peltier. Nona's here to talk business in the studio. Let's start with housing confidence. It's slumped, unsurprising. What are the latest numbers?
Yeah, well, this is another survey. This one was taken in the first quarter of this year. And so it's a little bit dated,
but it shows where we've been and where we're heading. I spoke with the economist who did the survey. It's an ASB Housing Confidence Survey. It showed, for example, a net 81% of people expect interest rates to rise in the coming year. That's not necessarily a surprise, but that's a 26-year high. So It shows you how big the expectation is. And net 20% of the people surveyed said this was not a good time to buy a house. And that's not a surprise either. What the economist at ASB, Mike Jones, said was he was surprised it wasn't a lot worse, given the numbers that we've been seeing coming out since December, with the it's more difficult to get credit and so forth. When does he think this might turn around? Well, it could be a while. As long as interest rates are continuing to rise, we can expect this downturn and this slump to intensify until there's a sign that we've seen a plateau in inflation and interest rate hikes.
Okay, and staying on the theme of housing, you've got a Christchurch house building firm saying that good builders are going to go broke soon. What's all that about?
It's about Jibboard.
Oh, okay.
We've heard this story before. So Jibboard is a brand name, and it's produced here in New Zealand as well as in Australia. There are competing products, but Jib accounts for about 95% of the market, and they simply just can't keep up with the demand. So they're producing in Australia, but there are competing products. The question here is, why are we not using more of those? Well,
are they signed up with building standards?
Yes, they are, but they come from China, for one thing. So there could be a Buy New Zealand preference in building consents. The ministry, MB, they produce building codes and so forth for the industry. They're saying substitutions are allowed. You can use, say, for example, this competing product that meets the same specifications, but councils are really worried about accepting them. And that's because here in New Zealand, we use Jib or plasterboard, which is the more generic name, as a framing material. So it has to have additional structural values because of our earthquake risk. And so there's a worry, councils are worried that if they accept a substitution from what they know and trust, they could end up being liable if something goes wrong.
Yeah, okay,
and
that's
so
interesting.
It is a big problem. It doesn't have a solution. Meanwhile, in Canterbury at least, there are houses and houses and houses that are ready to go, but for the Jib board. And as a result of that, some of the builders there are worried they're going to go to the wall because they can't charge any progress reports, they can't complete their jobs. This is a really serious situation.
Okay, one to watch. We're short on time, Nona, so let's do a sprint around the markets.
All right, well, let's do that. The local top 50 index up more than 0.5%, to 68-point gain to 11,417. New Zealand dollar stronger, but again, that's a big dollar story. 65.5 US cents, otherwise steady at 90.5 Australian and 52.1 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. We're about to do a story on passports. In a word, do you have a valid one at the moment?
I do. I have two.
Thanks, Nona. Borders open, tick. Holiday booked, tick. Passport still valid? Quick, go check. Because if it's not, you may miss the plane due to mega high demand for renewals and lengthy delays still, partly because COVID's hitting the passport office too. Here to give us the latest details is Maria Robertson from the Department of Internal Affairs. Kia ora, Maria. How long can people expect to wait to get their passport issued?
Oh, it's still about a month, Lisa, and appreciate being on your show. It's about a month, and we're just asking people to be patient. We know that these are time frames that they're not used to seeing from us. We're a world-class service. We're still producing a world-class passport. It's just taking us a bit longer, and we've still got some COVID absences.
Are some people having to wait longer? Is that an average you've given us?
No, about half of all applications currently we're issuing within 20 working days. But there are some that are taking longer. And some of the reasons for that, for example, we've got a very high proportion of child passports, and they take us longer to issue because we want to make sure that we get the identity check right and also the consent right. It's a sad reality that child trafficking is still a major issue around the world. So we've got this sort of higher proportion of children's passports that we're issuing, and it's very, very important that we get those right.
So pre-COVID, I understand you used to issue about 60,000 passports a month. Is that about right? Yeah. So
that is right.
So what are you doing now monthly?
Well, we're on track to do near enough those numbers this month, but I think the big issue, Lisa, is that for the 2 years prior to sort of March, we were only really operating at about 20% of what the normal demand would have been. The big thing is that we've seen about a 600% increase in passport application numbers over the last couple of months. And that's a massive thing to try and scale up when you're also dealing with staff absences.
How many people are actually processing them, Maria?
We've got, around the whole sort of processing area, we have around 400 staff working in our sort of services and access and operations group. We've taken on about 100 extra staff in the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks. We've got more staff actually being brought on board. We have to train them.
And you mentioned COVID. So on any given day, on average, how many people do you have off as a result of COVID or sickness?
Between 50 and 70, so sort of upwards of 20 to 22% of our staff are currently away at any given time unwell or isolating with family. And that's, for any organisation, that is a big hit. And what we're also seeing is some real changes in travel patterns. So whereas previously most of us would have booked our travel maybe 2, 3, 4, maybe longer months in advance, what we're seeing now is that about 40% globally, about 40% of the population that are booking travel for the month that they're booking it in. And that's because people are waiting to see that they're going to be able to travel.
Yeah, okay, which brings me to the next question, Maria. How many, what percentage of the applications you're getting are for an urgent issue of a passport?
Not that many. So if you say, let's say we've got 10,000 applications, say, in a sort of Monday to Friday week, we might see about 1,000 to 1,500 of those that people might consider to be urgent.
And are they genuinely urgent, or are they just people trying to shuffle to the front of the queue? And how do you determine that?
Well, people pay an urgent fee.
Yeah.
And that's, we're obliged to basically issue a passport within 3 working days if people have paid for it.
That's really interesting. So if you've got the money and you can stump up the extra, you go to the front of the queue, regardless of whether you actually have some genuine reason for needing an urgent passport.
That's right, but we've found that most people don't operate like that. Most people.
How's that fair, though? That seems a little unfair, doesn't it, Maria?
Well, I mean, if people, this is laid down, this is part of our agreement with the public that, if they have an urgent need, that they have that express service available to them. And we find that most people use that for genuine purposes.
So the other thing is that when I talked to you about a month ago, you said there was real difficulty enabling people to work from home, given the security around passports. Have you managed to work around there? I mean, technology these days is fantastic. Is there no way you can still have staff who are capable of working, doing this work from home and still meeting your security requirements?
It's not about technology, Lisa. It's about the environment and about our staff being subjected to risk or pressure, but also not being able to... So
hang on, sorry, could you just be a bit more explicit about that? Are you saying if they're outside of the office and they're issuing passports, someone might get to them?
Well, what we want to do is we want to make sure that doesn't happen. The New Zealand passport is an incredibly valuable document. It's one of the strongest passports in the world. It guarantees people who hold it either visa-free or guaranteed visa at the border to 180 countries. So, it's really valuable, and particularly if it got into the wrong hands, we wouldn't want to compromise that. So our view is still that we manage the security and privacy of the citizens of New Zealand data, and we do that from within our controlled environments, and that keeps everybody safe.
Thanks for the update, Maria. That's Maria Robertson, who's from the Department of Internal Affairs. It is 20 to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora anō, haere akine. Coming up after 6, what is it like for doctors on the hospital's front lines right now? And there's a plea from St John Ambulance. We'll bring that to you as well. Humai o whakaaro. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Do you reckon that the flu jab should be offered to everyone for free? Had the Health Minister on early. He reckons there's not enough of it to do that, and also he doesn't think it would alter the situation too much. But what do you think? And also, are you in the queue to get a passport? How long have you been waiting for? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Better get a hustle on to the headlines with Evie. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Tēnā koe, Lisa. The Minister of Health, Andrew Little, has told Checkpoint that the pressure the health system is currently under was always expected to happen at this time of year. John Bonning, spokesperson for the Australasian College of Emergency Medicine, says the perfect storm of winter illness, COVID-19 and a workforce crisis was entirely predictable. St John is warning people should expect delays for problems that aren't urgent because the ambulance service is under immense pressure. It's receiving more calls than usual and is facing staff shortages. A woman who works close to where a shooting took place in Auckland this afternoon says it was a scary situation. A person has been critically injured after the incident near the Papakura District Court and Police Station. The worker says there are a lot of police in the area and some are armed. US President Joe Biden has made an impassioned call for a ban on assault weapons and stronger background checks on gun buyers in the US. Police will be out in force over the long weekend, checking motorists' speed and targeting impaired and distracted drivers. ACC says 4 people are injured every hour in road accidents over a typical Queen's birthday period. And a report on the health of Wellington Harbour has found there's copper and lead in the water. The survey looked at data from more than 20 sites. Those are the headlines. Now let's check traffic. In Auckland, the right lane remains blocked on State Highway 20 southbound at Hillsborough on-ramp as response crews work to clear that crash scene. And with much of the country expecting some wet weather this long weekend, Waka Kotahi is reminding everyone to please drive with your lights on all day and drive with care. I'll update you with the latest news and weather at 6.
And that's right, you heed that warning from Evie. It is time for the government to declare a crime emergency, according to the Dairy and Business Association. It follows a spate of violent ram raids and dairy robberies, mainly in Auckland, including one where a customer was stabbed at a Sandringham superette this week. The government's launched a $6 million fund to help small businesses protect themselves with the likes of bollards, fog cannons, security alarms and screens. And in the budget, it announced $562 million will be invested in the police, basically increasing numbers and the resources that they have. It's not enough for the chair of Dairy and the Business Association, Sunny Kushal. He joins us now. Sunny, you want a crime emergency. What is that?
Good afternoon. See, we have the crime increasing almost every day. You see there's so many incidents happening. So the violent crime is up 21%, and the retail crime is up 31%. Gun violence is up. The gang membership up 40%. And the underreporting is staggering at 70%. The businesses are not safe, the properties are not safe, the workers are not safe, the residents are not safe, our visitors are not safe, our communities are living in fear. The New Zealand is becoming like what New York was like in the 1970s. So this is a real world. A sense of lawlessness is gripping across the country. So the soft on crime approach is not working, and that's where we are calling the Prime Minister to declare a crime emergency in New Zealand.
And so what difference would that make? Declaring a crime emergency, what practical difference would that make?
This would make the same way as they are doing for, say, the environment, the emergency and all. At least, they can put more resources and some bit of an urgency to deal with the situation. But unfortunately, instead of getting hard on crime, the government is weakening the law on serious offenders. I'm sure yesterday you would have seen, while the innocent people or hardworking, dairy owners, workers, or all those retailers, when they were getting stabbed and robbed, instead of urgently, responding to the growing lawlessness in our communities, the government was busy wasting Parliament's time by repealing a 3 strikes legislation.
Sonny, those are potentially 2 separate issues, but if we look at the situation with the dairies and the ram raids, when you say the government is getting soft on crime, I mean, what do you mean by that? The police are swarming all over the place at the moment. They're dealing with gang violence in Auckland, a number of arrests, and they've set up a retail unit and also a special operation in Waikato. I mean, how are they being soft on crime?
You see, I mean, it all looks good to hear as announcements on the paper or verbally, but actually on ground reality, there is not enough police to deal with the situation. You know, even the most serious crimes, the police are not able to attend or not able to show up in time. It shouldn't take a gun straight for a police action. So we need more visible police who should be working closely with the businesses, building relations and then gathering that info on offenders. It's a simple, more police, more enforcement and more deterrent. But if you look at the incident which you have just quoted in Sandringham, where the customer was stabbed, so those offenders were there in that area for half an hour. Roaming around, and they were just looking for an opportunity. So had there been police patrolling and vigilance around, this incident could have been stopped.
Really appreciate your time, Sonny. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. That is Sonny Koshal, who's the Dairy and Business Association Chair. It is 14 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Britons have turned out in their thousands to mark Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee. Her Majesty is Britain's longest reigning monarch, the first to reach the milestone of 7 decades on the throne. There have been flypasts and parades in London, but the events have tired the 96-year-old, who has decided not to attend a Thanksgiving service. The BBC's Johnny Diamond reports.
From the early hours of the morning, people started gathering on the Mall, the great ceremonial route that links Buckingham Palace to Trafalgar Square. Huge Union flags hung on either side in the early morning sun. 4 deep, then 8 deep, then 10 or 12 deep. The crowds grew and grew. Surrounding streets became clogged with those trying to find a way in. And then the cheers began as units of the Household Division, the Sovereign's bodyguard, made their way from barracks. Men on foot, guns in carriages, the cavalry on horseback, gold braid glinting in the sunlight. A procession of military history and glory making its way to the Queen's birthday parade.
Quick, march!
On Horse Guards Parade in the heart of ceremonial London, a military tradition reaching back centuries, trooping the colour when a regiment's flag is presented to the Sovereign. In the Queen's place today, her son, Prince Charles. In summer sunshine, he inspected the line of guardsmen and women and then saluted the colours as they were lowered. As the ceremony unfolded, the royal standard unfurled above Buckingham Palace. The Queen was in her London residence, and as she was not going to the parade, it would come to her. She took the salute from the balcony, using a stick given to her by the army for a little support. As the Horse Guards Division left the area in front of the palace, the crowd that had lined the route the military had taken surged in, happy and hungry for a sight of the Queen. And then she emerged again, this time flanked by much of her family. A Royal Air Force flypast shook the sky, from the Spitfires and Hurricanes that saved the country so many decades ago, to the Hercules that brought so many from Afghanistan last year. Finally, the Red Arrows pounded past, red, white and blue smoke trailing their path. On the ground and in the air, a first salute to the Queen this Platinum Jubilee.
Meanwhile, whilst the 96-year-old Queen was no doubt tucked up in bed on the other side of the world, back here a very special ceremony was held to mark her Platinum Jubilee. Ruth Hill was at the Wellington Cathedral of St Paul for the service.
It started with a spine-chilling karanga to welcome the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and the Government Administrator Dame Helen Winkleman representing Her Majesty. As befitting a monarch, there was a lot of pomp, both the military and ecclesiastical kind. The Bishop of Wellington, Justin Duckworth, told the congregation of the Queen's long association with the cathedral, starting with her first visit to New Zealand in 1953.
During this visit, she laid this cathedral's foundation stone and toured 46 towns and cities to huge crowds. It is estimated that 3 of every 4 New Zealanders turned out to see her.
One of Her Majesty's titles is Defender of the Faith, and the Bishop said she's lived up to that. He quoted from an address she gave in 2010.
Christ's example has taught me to seek respect and value all people.
It fell to the former Commonwealth Secretary-General, Sir Don McKinnon, to give a more personal insight into his former boss and her love of cricket, Jersey cows and horses. He assured everyone that due protocol would be followed and he had no wish to upset any Buckingham Palace courtiers, but then went on to share a couple of anecdotes. He said on the eve of the 2002 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Australia, he gave Her Majesty a briefing at Buckingham Palace.
And suddenly I heard this voice, "See you in Australia." And I whipped around, and there's that smiling face, and written all over that face was, "Fooled you, didn't I?" A great mimic.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern quoted from her predecessor Sidney Holland from his speech to Parliament after returning from the funeral of George VI. He described watching the young Queen hesitantly signing her name Elizabeth R for the first time and his belief that he had witnessed the start of a new Elizabethan age.
But even he may not have dared assume that we would experience a sense of comfort and stability through challenge, tragedy and change that has been provided by Her Majesty Elizabeth R.
Helen Robertshaw's father was a vicar and helped fundraise to build the cathedral in the 1940s. She was disappointed to miss the Queen the first time she visited.
I had German measles at the time, so I didn't actually get here, but I was here for the service when she unveiled the plaque commemorating it in February 2002.
Helen Robertshaw, who brought a small stuffed beef-eater bear to the ceremony, says it was an honour to be there.
Because the Queen is such a person of integrity, and the Church and Jesus Christ mean such a lot to her. And I respect and honour her greatly. I'm afraid I'm not a Republican at all.
Meanwhile, the Governor-General, Dame Cindy Kiro, is in Britain to represent New Zealand at a series of official events attended by the Queen, returning on Wednesday.
And you royal watchers, I don't know if you've noticed that, Evie Ashton is practically wearing the same outfit as the Queen was at the Jubilee celebration.
I do think I've landed a bit at our New Zealand weekend.
Queen of the Checkpoint News team in her powder blue. Yeah. Okay, now let's get to some of your feedback on more serious issues. The hospitals being slammed in our earlier interview with Andrew Little, the Health Minister. Murray says the government has been completely asleep at the switch on the health system. They had all of the last couple of years to get as many workers into the country that they wanted. Another person, Little, has been saying that the health system would cope up until last week, yet already it's falling over and people will die unnecessarily as a result. On the issue of the flu injection, we asked if everyone should be able to get it for free, and he reckoned not. There wouldn't be enough either. This person says, oh my God, let it roll out. People have been dying of the flu and many other respiratory problems. And Gay's got in touch to say, I acknowledge that doctors and nurses are being slammed at the moment, but please think about allied health workers and mention how they are coping as well. I'm a medical laboratory technician in a hospital. We are also being slammed by work pouring in from the ED and wards, not just COVID testing. Gay points out we work 24/7, 365 days to provide a wider variety of testing. Yep, your mahi is appreciated. It may come as a surprise to some, but Taranaki is officially the sunniest region in New Zealand. Yeah, really? And it has the trophy to prove it. Okay. The Sunshine Cup arrived in New Plymouth this week and was duly welcomed with thunderstorms, hail and heavy rain. Now we're talking. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin braved the elements to get the story.
According to NIWA, which awards the trophy, Taranaki recorded 2,592 sunshine hours in 2021, pipping the Bay of Plenty by 30 hours. Reluctant to perhaps give up its reign, Whakatane has been somewhat tardy in handing over the silverware. Its timing for actually doing so couldn't have been much better. Not that New Plymouth Mayor Neil Holdham was going to let it spoil his sunny disposition.
Oh, I love a bit of irony. I saw that we had some 2 centimetre hailstones in New Plymouth yesterday. But look, it took a bit of time. Mayor Judy Turner, a lovely lady from Whakatane, was going to hand it over to me in person, but COVID stuff delayed that. But she was kind enough to engrave our New Plymouth on the cup and send it through, and we're delighted. I was expecting something slightly smaller.
Niwa meteorologist Tristan Myers says Taranaki generally gets good sunshine hours, but there's also been other forces at play.
In La Nina years, we get more of a northerly or northeasterly quarter wind. And because of that, it actually favors drier than normal conditions and warmer and sunnier than normal conditions in Taranaki. So the sort of underlying climate drivers have actually helped you edge out and win the Sunshine Cup.
The forecast for 2022 also looks good for the province.
I'll tell you what, I'm actually writing the summaries as we speak, and I can confirm with you that you are ahead. Currently, Taranaki is at 1,290 hours of sunshine, and just behind is the Bay of Plenty at 1,203 hours.
Australian visitor Mark was taking a stroll on the coastal walkway in New Plymouth. He couldn't believe he was in the sunshine capital of Aotearoa.
No, I had no idea, and I'm surprised to hear that.
What surprises you about that?
It's probably some of the biggest waves I've ever seen in my life, and it hasn't stopped raining all day.
Owen and Jenny were in the know.
Oh yeah, I advertise it all the time.
So what's up with today then, mate?
Oh, you got to have a change. It gets boring otherwise.
They reckon there's an upside to stormy days.
That's the reason, because the only time we usually do this is when it's raining or wet, because there's not so many people here, and it's good.
No bikes and dogs and kids.
Craig Hitchcock is the head groundsman at Papakura Park. He should know a bit about the weather, right?
Not today, but yeah, the last 6 months have been very dry and sunny, yeah, and warm. Is that typical? Of course it is.
Jacob, who was walking his dog Bernie around the main lake at the park, wasn't so sure.
It's pretty varied. I suppose we do get a lot of sunny days. I don't see it as a sunny place so much, but apparently we are.
Nathan was out for a lunchtime jog. He's a believer.
Especially if you take the summer we've had, it's been sunshine every day. Even when we've had a southerly, it's been beautifully and sunny, you know what I mean? Beautiful and sunny. So I think, we've had quite a good run of it, to be honest with you.
Meanwhile, New Plymouth Mayor Neil Holdham has some advice for the doubters.
Yeah, and look, if you know the rules around here, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes and the sun will be out.
So there you have it. Eat your heart out. Tairāwhiti, Bay of Plenty, Nelson, the winterless north even. It's Taranaki, sunshine capital of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
And you can check out the video for that story. It'll be on our web page. I'm inclined to call BS on that. I want to recount. Really? Taranaki, the sunniest place in the country? What say you,
I always
Evie?
thought it was Nelson.
Yeah.
Like always Nelson. But Whakatane.
I'm biased. My money's on Gisborganza. Recount, please. Right, to some of your feedback on ram raids and dairy attacks. Jeremy from Wellington says no cigarette sales, no dairy ram raids. Another listener says Sunny is right, put simply. And Francis has got in touch to say at last someone is saying what we're thinking about increasing crime in New Zealand. We are too soft on crime. On the hospital squeeze, Little and the government knew this would happen. They should have learnt from Australia, including ambulance staff, and yet he still claims we have enough capacity. He should be sacked. More on that after 6.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Kia ora tātou. Ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Minister of Health admits hospitals are under pressure from illness at the moment, but says it was always expected it would happen over the winter. Dunedin Hospital is closed to visitors because of a COVID outbreak. Hawke's Bay Hospital is fighting flu cases, and Counties Manukau is trying to cope with a surge of winter illnesses. Andrew Little has told Checkpoint that a rise in disease was always likely.
We've had 2 years with the borders closed, and we just haven't had the flu and the flu strains that we would ordinarily see. We expected that there would be elevated levels of infection this year. I think, as some of the clinicians have said, it's probably hit us a little earlier than we expected.
Andrew Little is urging people to get vaccinated against the flu as soon as possible. Workers near the Papakura courthouse where a shooting took place this afternoon say police have given them no information about what happened. One person was critically injured in the incident shortly before 1 o'clock. Katie Todd was there.
At least 8 armed officers guarded the scene this afternoon, with a section of Great South Road cordoned off to traffic. Other police officers were seen speaking to people inside the bar next door to the courthouse. Devika Sharma manages the Unichem pharmacy across the road. She says she didn't hear the shooting, but looked outside and saw a man lying on the ground outside the courthouse, being treated by paramedics. The police wouldn't tell her if the shooter was still at large. Cordons have now been lifted.
The Cook Island Prime Minister and China's Foreign Minister have met to discuss bilateral cooperation. In a virtual meeting, Prime Minister Mark Brown met with Wang Yi to discuss economic recovery, climate change resilience, health and transport. China has been providing economic and social support to the Cook Islands for 25 years. Mr Brown says Mr Wang has intentions to continue supporting the Cook Islands and Pacific recovery, and a deal could be made with China and other Pacific partners in the months ahead. Mr Wang wraps up his Pacific tour in Papua New Guinea and Timor-Leste. Muslim leaders say a new research centre dedicated to preventing and countering violent extremism will need community involvement. He Whenua Tauri Kura is one of the recommendations to come out of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into mosque attacks. The directors say they've already had feedback that communities impacted by vitriol and violence need to be involved in setting the research priorities. Muslim community leader Anjum Rahman says this is critical.
We don't want to be the guinea pigs that they come and research on. We want to have a part in deciding the research questions and thinking about how the results are interpreted, and we want to see people of communities that are targeted rising up the ranks of this centre to take leadership positions.
11 scholarships have been provided to students who will conduct research for the centre. US President Joe Biden has called for a ban on the sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in the wake of a mass shooting at a Texas primary school. During an impassioned address at the White House, he proposed raising the minimum age for buying guns, tougher background checks for prospective customers, and a repeal of the liability shield for gun manufacturers. Mr. Biden called on people to use their vote to get change.
I've been in this fight for a long time. I know how hard it is. But I'll never give up. And if Congress fails, I believe this time a majority of the American people won't give up either. I believe the majority of you will act to turn your outrage into making this issue central to your vote. Enough, enough, enough.
Shortly after Mr Biden began his address, police in the town of Ames in Iowa received reports of a shooting at a local church. A gunman had shot dead 2 people before turning his weapon on himself. Earlier, police in Oklahoma said a gunman who killed 4 people at a medical building in Tulsa had targeted the surgeon he blamed for continuing pain after a recent operation. And school children, diplomats, dignitaries, representatives of many faiths and ordinary parishioners were among those invited to a special service in Wellington today to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. A self-described monarchist, Helen Robertshaw, says she was disappointed to miss the Queen in 1953 when she laid the foundation stone for the cathedral.
I had German measles at the time, so I didn't actually get here, but I was here when she came out, because she wasn't allowed to come out because of 9/11 in 2001 when they did consecrate the cathedral because it was debt-free. But I was here for the service when she unveiled the plaque commemorating it in February 2002.
Helen Robertshaw, who brought a small stuffed beef-eater bear to the ceremony, says it was an honour to be there because the Queen is such a person of integrity. That's the news.
All right, it's not exactly Matinee Idol's birthday too, but we're still celebrating it. Actually, it's not the Queen's real birthday either, just the official one. So it's our official birthday too. Matinee Idol with Phil O'Brien, Simon and Alec Morris, Monday afternoon on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, showers becoming isolated this evening. Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui, and also from Waipomo to Kapiti Coast, showers possibly thundery with hail easing this evening and then clearing tomorrow morning, becoming fine. From Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington, isolated showers more widespread for a time in Hawke's Bay and Gisborne this evening, with possible thunderstorms clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. Looking at Te Waiponamu, Nelson and Bulla, mostly fine. Scattered showers for a time this evening, possibly heavy. Westland and Fiordland, scattered showers in southern Fiordland and also north of Hokitika, becoming isolated this evening, mainly fine elsewhere. Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly fine this afternoon, frosts tomorrow morning. Otago and Southland, showers clearing before dawn tomorrow and becoming fine. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers. The time is 6 minutes past 6. I'll update you with the latest headlines at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Hospitals around the country are slammed with COVID, staff shortages and an onslaught of seasonal ills. And we're barely into winter, with some predicting the worst is still to come. Dunedin hospitals closed to visitors due to a high number of corona cases and concerns it could spread. This week, Christchurch Hospital had to put off some major surgeries because of a large number of very unwell people needing to be admitted, pushing it to 112% occupancy. And it's averaging 200 staff off sick every day. Auckland's Middlemore Hospital is also creaking at the seams, and joining us now is Sarah Dalton from the Association of Salaried Medical Professionals. Sarah, would you call it a crisis?
Yeah, it absolutely is a crisis. We called that a few months ago, actually. We know that there's a winter surge every year, but this year it's more like a tsunami, we think.
So what is it like in the trenches?
It's horrible. We're incredibly concerned for our members who are senior doctors and dentists, mostly working in hospitals. We're concerned for them and for their colleagues, junior doctors, nurses, allied health workers. It is not sustainable, it's not safe for patients, and it's not very safe for staff.
And so, I mean, what is it like for them in practical terms? Are they working extra shifts? Are they filling in for people who are ill? What is going on?
So it's all of those things. It's also knowing that you're going into work being asked to see more people than can be seen. It's about going into work knowing there might be one or none of a particular worker group, whether that's a nurse or a junior doctor or whoever is supposed to be there, so that you're talking significant gaps in a service that just simply can't be filled. It's also that horrible feeling of going home from work and knowing that you're probably going to be texted or phoned to ask if you can come in and fill yet another gap. So it's causing this degree of moral injury and burnout that I know we talk about a lot, but there is absolutely nothing that has happened across our system to alleviate any of those things at this time.
Okay, so what more can the government do? Because there was record spending in the budget, including $80 million that's tagged for recruitment. I mean, what more can the government do on a practical level to alleviate the pressure you're feeling at the moment?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because obviously recruitment is future focused and we're talking about now. So, I mean, I was surprised to hear the Minister's response to the free flu jab suggestion. We think that would be a very smart thing to do, and people are used to being able to access free vaccinations through the COVID rollout. We think that would be a great preventive thing that could be done. We think that
So why do you think it's not happening, Sarah? Having listened to him, right, he indicated that they are offering the flu jab, which they are, to a wider group of people than normal because of COVID and all the issues that we're facing. They kind of stopped short, wasn't keen on the idea. Do you think it's that we don't have enough, or that it wouldn't change the situation?
No, I'm guessing it's supply. I absolutely am guessing it's supply. And it'll also be system capacity, because a lot of healthcare workers got diverted from their regular duties to assist with the COVID vaccination rollout, so they can't afford to take those people away from the front lines now. I think there needs to be more visibility of hospital leaders and managers down at the coalface so that they can see exactly what their staff are going through, and maybe that will help them come up with better ideas day by day to alleviate the pressures people are under. I also think I'm a bit sick of hearing what I think is now fake gratitude towards our health workers, because this whole time that they've been saying thank you to the doctors, nurses and allied health workers in hospitals and community settings, all of the health unions have been battling to try and get fair pay settlements for those people who are working so hard. And it's been like pulling teeth.
So do you think that's a marketing ploy on the government's behalf then? Thank you.
Well, it's easily said, isn't it? But what does that actually look like? And how genuine does it feel if you're told you have to suffer a year of pain and take a 0% pay increase in the face of, soaring cost of living? It's not a pretty picture.
So do you think we will see record departures from New Zealand or from this profession into other areas?
We're incredibly worried that will be the case. There's a number of people choosing where they can to move across to work in private settings, which are much calmer. They don't do acute work and emergency work. And we're increasingly seeing people go to Australia where, they are desperate for staff as well, and pay rates are way better.
So, Sarah, it is barely the start of winter, right? What are your members bracing for if this is what we've got right now?
They're bracing for more of the same, possibly worse. They're really anxious. They're really scared. And, this isn't just a COVID thing either. We've got this phrase about unmet need, which doesn't sound that bad, but those two words represent maybe 1 million New Zealanders who have health needs that are simply not being addressed because they can't get care, they can't access care, they might not even have a diagnosis.
Sarah, do you believe that the pressure that the health system is under at the moment is going to lead to deaths?
It's probably not something that I'm qualified to speculate about, but if you've got that level of unmet need, there are obviously going to be people that are going to suffer detrimental consequences for not being able to get the care that they need. Yeah.
Do you think that the Minister is being transparent and fully recognises the pressure on the system?
I imagine that the Minister is responding based on the information he's been given.
So what does that suggest, Sarah, about the information he's been given?
Yeah, I think there are a few critical gaps between what our members are experiencing on the hospital floors and in their community settings and what gets transmitted through to the responsible ministers via the Ministry of Health.
What, so someone's telling porkies? Management?
No, I wouldn't call it porkies, but I would say that, we spend a lot of time debating what we think is, appropriate, for example, in terms of staffing. It's only very, very recent, and probably with the genesis of the health reforms, Health New Zealand and the Māori Health Authority, that we're getting any traction on our calls to staff up a bit more. We've just been routinely had our statistics dismissed over the last 4, 5, 6 years. I mean, this was entirely predictable.
Really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you for joining us. That is Sarah Dalton, who's from the Association of Salaried Medical Professionals. Now, St John is getting more 111 calls, many more than it usually expects at this time of the year, putting the ambulance service under immense strain. Winter demand has come 6 weeks earlier than expected, as Jean Edwards reports.
Paramedics are under pressure, so if it's not an emergency, patients can expect to wait. St John's Deputy Chief Executive, Dan Ows, says delays extended to 14 hours for one person in the past week.
It was a request for transport from a GP, but 14 hours is much longer than we would like to keep people waiting in the community, quite clearly.
He says the huge demand is affecting response times.
The majority of patients who have an urgent condition we're attending to within 15 minutes. We would like that to be much closer to 8 minutes. The majority of patients are still getting a response time fast. We would like to do better.
St John is receiving 14% more 111 calls than its anticipated upper limit for this time of year. Mr O says an ambulance will always be sent in a life-threatening emergency, but people with non-urgent cases can first expect a phone call from a paramedic or nurse.
If it's not an emergency, please think about calling your GP or Healthline first, and know that if you've got a non-life-threatening problem, you'll be getting a phone call and you may receive a delayed response.
But Dan O says people with broken bones shouldn't worry about big delays.
I'm talking about people that call us because they have been to their GP and they're frustrated that their antibiotics are not working immediately for them. I'm talking about people who are calling us because they've run out of paracetamol. I'm talking about people who have called us because they don't have transport to the GP to get their stitches removed.
St John is also dealing with chronic staff shortages. 100 workers are off sick or looking after family members every day. It's also trying to fill 120 staff vacancies.
New Zealand now has its own specialist research centre that will focus on the prevention of violent extremism in Aotearoa. He Whenua Torikura, which translates to a country at peace, delivers on one of the recommendations out of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the mosque attacks. Speaking at its unveiling at Parliament today, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the centre builds on the legacy of March 15. Our political reporter Annika Smith was there.
Jacinda Ardern welcomed back to Parliament and straight into business, unveiling a program to fund independent research on the causes and prevention of violent extremism and terrorism. Her whirlwind trip in America fresh in the Prime Minister's mind.
I've had several opportunities to speak to our experience and the work we're doing collaboratively, including on the Christchurch call. I came away with two messages in the front of my mind around that work. Firstly, as I said, there is much more work for us to do, but there is also room for hope.
More than 3 years since the March 15 terror attacks, and a suite of government responses continues to roll out. Today, a specialist research centre, the 14th recommendation out of the Royal Commission of Inquiry. It's called He Whenua Torikura and is tasked with researching the prevention of extremism in New Zealand. Professors Paul Spoonley and Joanna Kidman will head it up. The significance and stakes of the work not lost on either academic.
We have more than enough evidence to demonstrate at this point that there are those in this country who subscribe to political subcultures and ideologies that are deeply, deeply toxic.
We are going to produce an evidence base that will help us to understand and make sense of those hairline fractures in our communities that at times have splintered into violence and hatred.
Professor Spoonley says they've already had feedback from Hui and Christchurch that the research needs to have a bottom-up approach. Muslim community leader Anjum Rahman says communities are critical.
We don't want to be the guinea pigs that they come and research on. We want to have a part in deciding the research questions and thinking about how the results are interpreted, and we want to see people of communities that are targeted rising up the ranks of this centre to take leadership positions.
Federation of Islamic Associations Chair Abdur Razak says he'll be watching that the research centre gets enough money.
This is not ambulance at the bottom. This is actually preventing. This is the safety net. This is where the young scholars are going to study of how we can prevent, what are the issues. So we need more funding for it. And it's not a cost, it's actually investment.
Victoria University will be the first to host the research centre, which is expected to be homed in different tertiary institutions over time.
It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The actor Amber Heard is planning an appeal after losing a defamation trial against her former husband Johnny Depp. Ms Heard says she's heartbroken while Johnny Depp says he has his life back. But many questions are being raised about online abuse and the wider impact of the case. The BBC's David Silito reports.
Johnny Depp wins in his lawsuit against
Stunning verdict. Victory for Johnny.
This morning, the growing fallout.
Stunning, unexpected, dramatic were the words today that greeted Johnny Depp's legal victory. Amber Heard had alleged she had endured years of abuse. The jury didn't believe her. However, her lawyers are not giving up yet.
Her next move is appeal. There were a number. Heartbroken. She is heartbroken. And one of the first things that she said when she came back from the verdict, when we went into the conference room, was, "I am so sorry to all these women."
This is a case that struck deep. Online, it's become almost inescapable.
Yeah, I've been following it on like TikTok and stuff.
You've been following it on what?
Yeah, little snippets on TikTok. I mean, if you go on TikTok, it's like, it kind of just like appears in your feed.
I think it's really weird to publicize a domestic abuse trial like that.
The number of views of videos with the hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp has now topped 19.5 billion. Yes, 19.5 billion. This online torrent has left many deeply concerned.
I fear that the impact will be quite negative, from the memes to the hashtags to the online bullying. Victims are watching this and they are thinking about, how will I be treated if I come forward?
And it should be noted, in a previous UK trial, Amber Heard's allegations were judged to be substantially true. But this second trial has been very different.
And remember, Amber Heard was not writing in the Washington Post as Johnny Depp's ex-wife. She was a spokeswoman, an ambassador for a civil rights organisation talking about women's rights and Me Too. And many people watching her testimony began to have doubts on what impact it could all have on a wider movement.
Take Yasmin Bedwood. She got 4.4 million hits for one of her videos about the trial, and what drew her in were concerns about Amber Heard.
This is someone who has become the face of a movement that women have been fighting for years. And so to have someone be at the front of that and not be truthful is damaging to not only the organization, but I think women overall.
But for Johnny Depp, who has this week been performing in the UK, the trial has changed everything. For Team Johnny, it's case closed, reputation restored.
National Geographic's books about art and rock music were in the sights of the hardy crowd turning out for a popular annual second-hand book sale in Palmerston North today. Our Manawatu reporter Jimmy Allingham spoke to the bibliophiles at the front of the queue.
It was a wet and wild morning, but that didn't stop David Johnson turning up about 5 a.m. He's not even at the head of the queue, as serious book lovers made sure they snapped the prime spots to peruse the dozens of tables at the Red Cross book sale. A soaking shirt was a small price to pay for David Johnson to get the best reading.
A range of topics: philosophy, mathematics, science, psychology, anthropology, languages, paleontology, physics.
Others, like Anne Van Brunt, had something more specific in mind.
Specifically, I'm looking for art books with good colour plates. I hate art books that have black and white plates. What use is that, a black and white plate? And secondly, I want more specialised art books. I don't want like a general history of Degas. I want what Degas did in this particular part of his life.
Why have you decided to queue?
Oh, because there's a limited number of good art books that are donated. If you don't get there at the beginning, they tend to get snapped up. Yeah, art books are very limited, good ones, you know? People don't tend to get rid of good art books.
Once the weather cleared, the queue lengthened. They came from across the North Island, such as Gordon Smith from Wellington.
I go for non-fiction, mainly history, travel, this sort of thing. Up at 6 o'clock, leave at 7. This is a very good book. It's large, it has a great range of books.
At 10 a.m, the doors were flung open and the keenest began their purposeful march, squelching across the Barber Hall lino to find the tables of their choice. Most items cost $1 or $2. How many books do you normally buy?
Least the better, because every book I buy takes up space. I'm not here for quantity, I'm here to just be surprised.
Yes, I'm usually after audio stuff, vinyl records, CDs, cassette tapes, music DVDs, that sort of stuff.
Looking for Neville Shute. I haven't got a few of his. I haven't got On the Bench, and I haven't got A Town Like Alice. Everybody loves those.
Jill Spicer, an organiser of the sale, says more than 4,000 boxes of books are looking for a new home.
The books are dirt cheap, so for people who don't have a lot of money, it's fantastic. The books get another chance to go around. People who have books and don't know what to do with them and hate the thought of having to throw them out get a chance to give them to us.
As the tills start ringing, the early birds are leaving with arms full of books and puzzles.
I've just bought some National Geographic magazines because they're very good. I've got 22, so that'll keep me out of mischief.
I've got about 10 puzzles, jigsaw puzzles. I do lots of them. So I've got 10 for the price of about 2 puzzles.
The sale finishes on Monday and thousands of keen readers are expected through the door.
New beginnings and a newfound confidence have the Black Ferns bullish about their chances of defending their World Cup title in October and November. Their quest begins in earnest on Monday when the Pacific Series kicks off in Tauranga, with New Zealand taking on Australia and Canada playing the United States. Rugby reporter Joe Porter has more.
The Black Ferns are in a race against time to catch up to the likes of England and France ahead of their World Cup title defence in Aotearoa later this year. The New Zealanders suffered 4 heavy defeats to those two teams at the end of 2021, with the tour resulting in an independent review of the side's environment and culture. The review was damning and it led to the resignation of head coach Glenn Moore, with former All Blacks assistant coach Wayne Smith taking over, and former Black Ferns Sevens Olympic gold medal winning coach Alan Bunting brought in as a consultant. The veteran Black Ferns midfielder Chelsea Semple says with the slate wiped clean, they must focus on what's ahead of them.
We needed a lot of things to change after what happened at the end of the year tour last year, and if there was any time to make that happen, it was now before World Cup. So definitely a lot of changes, and I think even the way we play, you'll see some difference come game time on Monday.
While Monday's test will be the Black Ferns' first of the year, Semple says their preparation for the World Cup started 6 months ago.
When we kind of landed after the end of year tour last year and realised that we were not up to where we needed to be to compete to retain the World Cup, girls went away over the break and did a lot of work, and we've come back as much stronger individuals and as a stronger team this year.
The Black Ferns know they need to raise their game to new levels to beat the best of the Northern Hemisphere, and fullback Renee Holmes says there's only one way to do that.
Game time. We need to be playing as much rugby as possible. We're only going to get better by playing games, and that's unfortunately something we have missed out on the last couple of years.
The Black Ferns have just 4 tests before the World Cup in which to dial themselves in, but Holmes is confident they now have the right culture under consultant Alan Bunting and the right management under new coach Wayne the Professor Smith.
He's definitely the professor. He's putting us under constant pressure. He's forever changing training. Trainings always look like a game scenario. Like it's a forever growth environment, and the team is definitely looking very, very sharp.
Just how sharp will be revealed on Monday when the Black Ferns kick off their Pacific Series against Australia in Tauranga.
Let's get to your thoughts on things that have been on the program before we head off tonight. On the squeeze on hospitals, and our earlier interview with Sarah Dalton, who's with the Association of Salaried Medical Professionals. This listener, Frank, has got in touch to say, actually, no, it's not Frank, I think it's someone else. But anyway, this person says, Sarah is 100% accurate. I'm an educator that visits hospitals around New Zealand. Everyone is at breaking point. Patients lining the corridors, poor quality buildings, understaffing. There is no incentive to stay in healthcare. And a few of you have raised issues about that. Health system has been run down for decades. It only functions because of staff goodwill. Many millions of dollars needed to staff and equipped appropriately, another person says. Gerald from Wellington says it's time to cut demand for ED by reducing access to alcohol, especially off licence. For example, by raising the legal age to 20. That is a whole other conversation, but an interesting one to have, Gerald. Thanks for your feedback. Another person says government is fighting a losing battle when it comes to health, and future healthcare will be done by AI and robots. The public will demand it. And this one from Frank, who says, the media needs to look at themselves. The pressure on government to open up was platformed and amplified by click-hungry media. Whinging by business lobbyists and opposition MPs was relentless. On the subject of building supplies, and this is about Gibboard, right? People trying to get a hold of it. Rare as hen's teeth, we're told. Why haven't Fletcher's Windstones dramatically increased production of Gib products, says John. I think they're building another factory, aren't they? Maybe we'll do some more on that. And another person says, why don't builders use plywood as lining, stronger than Gib and can be painted? Not sure about the relative cost. And Terry says, almost every other product comes from China. So what is the problem using plasterboard? Don't know the answer to that. Maybe someone can get in touch and let us know. But something maybe worth looking into for us. Now, that is about all we've got time for. The late news team's going to keep you updated tonight, and they'll be with you all through the long weekend. If you missed anything on the show, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast from. Kaua e wariwari te atatero I a mātou kōrero. Lots of great videos. Check them out online. Hey, and have a fantastic long weekend.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Sarah Dalton from the Association of Salaried Medical Professionals has told Checkpoint that the staffing crisis hospitals are facing was predictable, and the Ministry of Health has been dismissing staffing statistics for years. One person is in hospital with critical injuries after a shooting outside the Papakura courthouse in Auckland this afternoon. Muslim leaders say a new research centre dedicated to preventing violent extremism will need community involvement. And the Cook Islands Prime Minister and China's Foreign Minister have met to discuss bilateral cooperation. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.